Yeah, and she came on and she spoke about like, her experiences being a woman in STEM and so on and so forth.
Mm.
All right, still waiting for Darren Miller. All right, I'm getting the go ahead that we are live. Yes. All right, so welcome to episode 2 of Gray Matters.
Okay,
Today,
here we go.
all right, here we have Darren Miller joining now. All right, yeah, welcome to episode 2 of Gray Matters. We're joined today by Gavin Dennis, Curtis Bulbsy Earl, and Darren Miller, and the main presenter, Romario Cohen. So today we'll be talking about digital privacy. Um, but before we start, let's just have each of them give a brief introduction of themselves. So we'll start with Mr. Gavin Dennis.
All right, so thanks for having me. My name is Gavin Dennis. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. I lead G5 Cybersecurity and the Caribbean CSPA, which is the Caribbean Cybersecurity and Privacy Association. So I help companies to secure their networks against attacks.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Uh, Mr. Bobsy Earl.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me on this show this afternoon. My name is Curtis Busby, and I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Computing at the University of the West Indies at Mona. And one of the areas of interest in terms of research is in cybersecurity.
Okay, great, great. I remember you will lecture and become 2011, 26, and
Yes.
27 in first year. And I must admit, you were a good lecturer.
Oh, thank you very much.
And
That's very kind of you to say.
you're welcome, sir. And lastly, Mr. Darren, make sure that I get your name right. Mr. Darren Miller.
It's fairly easy, Romario. Yes, I'm Darren Miller. I'm a business development strategist, and
Yeah,
I'm also the owner of a freight forwarding company. It's called Blue Ship Cargo and Freight. So I'm particularly interested to be having this conversation today because data assets are a big part of our own business, and to the extent that we are able to secure our customers' data when they do business with us, that's critical to our own functioning.
yeah. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so let me just throw the first question that I have. What comes to mind when you hear about privacy in the digital age? Gavin, we'll start with you. What comes to mind when you hear that phrase?
So for me, privacy, it's to sum it up really, it's the right to be left alone. So yeah, so that's really that sums it up directly for me. Just the
Okay,
right to be left alone and for your data to be treated in a way that you want it to be treated.
okay, okay. Dr. W. Earl?
Uh, okay, when I hear privacy, and because of the nature of what I do, the thing that comes to mind is the management of selective revelation of someone's data about oneself or about some information that they deem to be confidential. That's what I think of when I hear of privacy.
Okay, okay,
Selective revelation is what comes to mind first.
okay. Mr. Darren Miller.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all of the above. Indeed, it is in many instances a legal framework that is established for persons across democracies, and even to an extent to non-democratic nations.
Yeah,
Persons having the right to ensuring that their personal information, data about them, are kept secure, that it is used as they intend for it to be used, that it is not used for any external or unrelated purpose, but they must be aware of how their data is being used, by whom, how often, and so on. And it is protected by various statutes across the globe.
Yeah. Something quite interesting happened, I think, last week with um NCB and people using their phones and hacking into their accounts. I think that's how the story went. Did any of you guys hear about that?
Well, yes, but the issue, Romaria, is quite broader than
Mhm.
NCB. In fact, a lot of financial institutions are today threatened by cybersecurity concerns. And the
Yeah,
fact is that we are a more sophisticated space today, the global space. Persons have access to technology, its utility, and they have been using it for all kinds of reasons. I mean, I open my emails every day, and if there's not at least 100 social engineering scams, what they call phishing, persons telling me that I would have won the lottery of some millions of dollars, then it's not a regular day for me.
yeah,
So persons are becoming more inclined to use digital technology to scam persons, and there's so many different kinds. You talk about malware and ransomware. Persons get access to your data and they prevent you from gaining that same access that you need, for example, to deal with payroll in a company. And they say to you that unless it is that you pay me $100 million, you won't get back access to this. So companies are hard pressed today to ensure that they protect their systems, especially in the financial institutions where our own data, our own assets and resources are kept.
yeah. I think one of the biggest companies right now that really uses and manages our data are the social media entities out there, right?
Yes.
So the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram, all these entities. So how, based on your knowledge, the knowledge that you guys have, how do these social media companies use our personal data? And how do they try to protect our personal data?
Well, those are two different questions. But for the first one, that's an interesting question. Sorry, gentlemen, if you don't mind, since I'm
No,
still
it's
here.
okay, it's okay.
Um, that role is also a very interesting one, and it's interesting because, as you said, the Twitters and Facebooks of this world are quite large in their in their reach, quite far in their reach. And if you think about it, when let's say you were to sign up for Facebook, as part of that, they would ask some questions and they would require some bits of information from you. And when you sign up for that service, you willingly provide that information. Now, the thing is, having done so, uh, that information is stored, let's say, in a server, one of Facebook's thousands of servers. And that information now actually could become accessible by other parties. And it doesn't mean that you are aware of the fact that that data is now available by those other parties. And those other parties could simply be other companies that provide Facebook services on their own to help them in the provision of their service to you. And so that now becomes available to those third party providers. And you, as a user, are completely unaware of it. And that data of yours becomes available to them, and it is used in ways that you were not aware of or you probably did not agree to. And as a consequence, that now becomes very widespread, that data that was yours. Now, you may think it's simply things like your name or your address and so on, but there's lots of information that is collected even without your knowledge, just by virtue of your logging in or signing on or joining onto a network. So things like if you're using a smartphone, that smartphone has let's say, a cell number assigned to it. It certainly would also have an IP address. It would have an original equipment manufacturer's number. All of these things can be collected without you actually agreeing to it and without your knowledge of it. And these things can then be used to form a profile of you, and that profile, which becomes sort of a collection of your data, is now available to many others. And that's one of the key issues with privacy. It's that same selective revelation of data, but you are unaware of some of the data that has been collected about you, and where that data now resides, you have no clue.
Yeah. Well, if I may add to that, I mean, it's I mean, social media, and I was just saying, and Romari, I hope you'll indulge me because I'm actually streaming with some colleagues and friends of mine as well on Instagram because a very important discussion we're having, and I was sharing with them that social media agencies, in fact, the entire technological space uses algorithms to be able to provide various services that are broken down by way of what we're even doing now, interfacing in this particular space. And it's interesting how some social media entities have gone about it. They've done it with a great degree of understanding of human psychology, how it is that we think, what are our addictions, why it is that we are inclined to pick up our phone and to stay on our phone sometimes for 7 hours and more per day. And if you look at the very simple things, for example, at notifications, when you get a notification on your phone, you'll realize that if the notification is to inform you that someone has sent you a picture, the actual picture is not shown in the notification. You're only able to see the picture when you click on the notification and access the space to get that information. And that is how they want for you to engage with the content, not for you to just look at it and be aware and move on, but for you to click in, to indulge, and to be exposed, as another example, to advertisements related to the kind of conversation you're having with somebody else. So it is not a simplistic space in which we exist. It is a space that understands very well how it is that human beings are addicted and drawn to certain kinds of technology. And they have designed it utilizing those algorithms to play into our interests or desires and to prey on those desires. And they're not paying us because we, as human beings, as users, by the way, you look at this industry and we are the only industry within this space that our customers are considered users. The only other industry where that is in existence is where drugs are concerned. So you call drug users users in social media, you call them users. In no other industry do we call our customers users. It is an addictive space. So they've designed it very strangely and very wildly, very smartly to ensure that persons not only gain access, but use it ongoingly so that they can monetize their efforts. Advertisers can earn from it. And we who are the users and we who are indeed the products are not being compensated for our data. What do I do every single day? They use that data and they generate advertisements that appeal to me, for which I'm not being paid.
You know, I think it's quite crazy how you feel as if you go on your device and in your mind, in your reality, all you do is scroll, you like a couple pictures, you put up a couple posts, but it's crazy to think that somewhere else in the world there are algorithms, or there are people who are using what you post online and using it against you for how they can help you. And not just as how um, you, Mr. Miller, talk about us being users, it's just as how we use drugs and we use social media and we're called users. There are times when I go online and it seems as if these people are always online and it seems as if they're kind of like addicted to it. And one of the ones that I personally love, but my gosh, it's very toxic over there, is Twitter. I love Twitter, but my gosh, it seems as if people can't get enough of the drama and the intensity of
It's
Twitter.
deliberate.
But yeah, I do believe it's quite deliberate. But let me ask you, sorry, my apologies for forgetting your names.
Is it
Mr.
Gavin? Because I think Gavin was
Mr. Goffins.
right,
So,
right.
so I'm not very good with names. Mr. Goffin, let me ask you because you say you work with pretty much securing data. So how do these big companies how do they ensure that your data is not going to be misused and be used against you?
So in terms of the like big tech companies, like the social media companies,
Uh, it, it,
or just
yeah,
companies in general.
just companies in general. So the big tech companies, social media, any company because pretty much every company has some form of our data, right?
So
Yeah.
so 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 a lot of companies aren't deliberately trying to protect your data from being misused against you, right? They are trying to them, from their perspective, the data that they have on you is for revenue generating purposes. So it's about how they can use the data that they've acquired through legal means to make money for them. And the problem with that is that sometimes the goal of trying to make money, it spills over into things which abuse people's privacy, even if they are not intentionally doing it, but it ends up being an abuse of people's privacy. And that's why you now have a lot of data protection laws popping up because of that misuse. So things like GDPR, now there's the Jamaica Data Protection Act, and a whole bunch of other countries around the world have data protection laws. A lot of countries, even in the Caribbean now. So it's because of this 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 trend of misusing people's data. That's what pushed the laws to now come into place to protect it. So it hasn't originally been a case where there was a strong focus on ensuring that your data isn't misused against you. The primary focus in the past has always been to ensure that the data that, from a company point of view, the data they have, they can use it in some way to generate income, because that's their whole purpose of existing, to generate a profit.
So I'll answer a question. So for all right, so for like the big tech companies like
Mhm.
Apple and Microsoft, they've created um very intelligent AIs, Siri, Alexa,
Yes.
I don't know the rest of them. And sometimes you hear crazy theories about how your device is watching you and listening to you. And
Mhm.
when you have AI such as Siri and Alexa, I mean, it makes you kind of believe that maybe they are. So um, what I'm asking you is, what do you think about these AI? Do you think that they pose some risk to your data? Because you can go to your artificial intelligence, your Syrian, you ask or tell that most of the stuff, and it's always around, it's always hearing or seeing where you're going. So how do you think that affects your privacy? Are we being protected against that or anything?
So so there's supposed to be a line, right, which companies aren't supposed to cross. So these AI technologies, they are tech, they are code, and they are things that people write, people create. So the AI itself, I don't blame the AI itself about what it's necessarily taking and what it's capturing. I blame the people who intentionally designed it to capture X amount of data, and the way how they use it behind the scenes, I blame them whenever they misuse it. So the AIs and all of these smart technologies, they can be very, very useful. For me, I find a lot of them useful. But what happens now is that they are useful to us and we pay for them, but again, the goal of for businesses of trying to generate income, sometimes that spills over into them using the data in unethical ways. So so in the AI themselves are not inherently dangerous. It's really about how the companies use the data that they are gathering from their AIs, and what they now take that data and do with it. Are they using it to abuse your privilege, your privileges and your privacy and your actual laws, their human rights? Are they taking that to now, pry into your personal life, capturing things that they didn't tell you they were going to capture, and that they were going to store or that they were going to share with another entity. And that's one of the big issues which have troubled Facebook, where there is a trend that has been documented in various forms that Facebook has abused people's privacy, and the kind of data that they claim that they were collecting, they were collecting much more, and also sharing it with third parties that they didn't tell the user they were sharing it with. So it really just comes back to the ethics of the people behind the AIs and behind all of these smart technologies, because they are ultimately the ones who decide what happens.
Yeah, I remember seeing some like court case with Mark Zuckerberg, and they were pretty much asking the same thing about data privacy
Mhm.
and stuff. But asking this to all of you again, like, what are the concerns you've heard people talk about in terms of their privacy with their data online? Because different people have different opinions on everything. So what are the concerns that people usually approach you with, whether it's a business or just a single person?
Darren, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Right. Romario, just before we move on, I just wanted to kind of just elaborate on the point that Gavin was responding to surrounding these assisted intelligences, as it were, or assistants. Because to put it into context, we need to make it clear what they are. And these intelligences are pieces of algorithm information that is placed in a very interesting way. Sometimes they are little vacuums in your house that go around and they clean. There's something on your desktop that is able to respond to certain commands for you to turn on the television or for you to open the front door, that sort of thing. And in many instances, they have not been optimized strongly enough as to be able to respond to commands of a particular person. So you'll find, for example, that there are phonetic challenges that these pieces of technology may have that would see me or you sitting down in a living room one afternoon and we're having a conversation. And in having that conversation, I say the word go, or I say the word going to. Now, the command that that particular assisted intelligence responds to is gump, just as an argument's sake. But I did not say gump. I said go or going to. And what they immediately start to do is that they start to listen into all the conversation that follows me saying go. I wasn't talking to Siri. I wasn't talking to Alexa. I was talking to my friend. And so what happens is that it stores that information and it uses that information to carry out certain commands or to allow interpreters, because there are actual interpreters who will be able to translate various languages all across the world. And they will use that information and keep it in the repository, sometimes for days, sometimes for months, and it is not deleted. Now, a classic example happened just recently where Google and its piece of technology looking at artificial intelligence and so on, they actually came under fire because those very persons who were responsible for translating across the languages leaked information that they saw about persons having conversations, bedroom discussions, persons involved in domestic abuse situations, and they leaked that data. And do you know what Google did? Google made it public that they were going to sue the particular agency that had a responsibility in leaking that information. They were not concerned or were able to or were prepared to respond to the concerns that customers may have about their data being kept for a long period and not being used as they would want it to be used. So many of these unethical questions are raising their heads now more than ever concerning the utilization of artificial or assisted intelligences. And I'll just make one very last quick point on this to illustrate the entire thing. Earlier, I mentioned to you that there may be, in some instances, I'm told that I'm breaking up. Okay, I'm not sure. I'm hoping that you're able to hear me a little clearer now. I was told I was breaking up earlier.
I'm
It's,
hearing.
it's clear. It's clear for me. Yeah, it's
Okay.
clear. It's
All
clear on
right.
my side.
All right. Yes. So the final point I'll make on this is that if, for example, you have a vacuum in your house, it's a robotic vacuum and it goes around and it cleans your house, okay? That piece of technology can be given certain commands. Go and clean the bedroom, go and clean the living room, sort of a thing. Now, there are hackers who are actually able to infiltrate the computer in your house, not the particular robot, no, but another desktop or some phone or something. And they infect it with a malware. And that malware is able to communicate with your robot and say to your robot, give me a landscape view or an overview about this entire house. I want to know where the kitchen is. I want to know where the bedroom is. I want to know where the living room is. But it can go further. The malware can actually send signals remotely now, not in direct contact, but remotely to say to them, give me the access codes to your security, your home security system. And that piece of technology, that robot will give that information and disarm the house. Now, obviously, having that information about the entire landscape of the house, plus information about the security codes, gives a potential hacker access to your house. So later on in the conversation, we will talk a little bit about some safeguards that persons can put in place to ensure that they protect themselves against hackers in this particular regard. But it's a challenge, and I think a lot of organizations today, these tech companies, have not answered fully the ethical concerns about what they do with our data, how they use our data. And I'm not just talking about information that is typed. I'm talking about biometric data, which includes your voice, which includes your iris scans, which includes your face scans. What are they doing with that information? Who are they giving it to? And could my house potentially be broken into because of lapses in judgment in this regard?
Yeah, Mr. Miller, I think you make some very good points, and you know, speaking of ethics, let me ask Dr. Bobs Earl. Being a lecturer, right, and you have students coming in, and I've seen some very talented students in terms of engineering and computing. Like, how do you demonstrate ethical practices to students? How do you like tell students that, okay, look, this is the line that should not be crossed when working with whatever business or person? Because you know as computer scientists and as engineers, a client comes to you and he gives you a task, an assignment. You essentially have a lot of power, because you can make or break that person essentially. So how how do you demonstrate these ethical practices to students?
Okay. Well, thanks for the question. And to answer that actually would form part of the answer to your previous question, which was what are some of the questions that people commonly ask with regard to privacy and what could happen. And so I will answer both if that's okay. And I'll try to be as brief as possible. The answer to the first one includes the second. One of the most common questions I get, not just related to privacy, is on, sir, how to hack? How do I go about hacking? And the typical answer that I give is that I'm not going to show you, right? There's a course that I deliver that's on cybersecurity, and I would say that more than half of the students come with the hopes of learning how to hack. That's not what we do. The thing is that people are people. Their personalities are what they are. Uh, we can, as a part of teaching anyone about cybersecurity, they must know about the types of attacks that exist and those that can be launched on different types of platforms and different types of people and so on. And when I say types of people, those who are perform different roles. And Mr. Miller has already spoken about a number of those attacks, from different types of malware to how biometrics can be used and so on. But one of the things that I always start off with is by talking about for example, the Jamaica Cybercrimes Act of 2015, and we spent some time going through that act. And so I explained to them what an offense under that act is, what some of the penalties are, and so that they know before they go and think of doing something, that they know what the potential repercussions would be. Now, I still can't stop anyone from doing anything thereafter, but I know that we have had those discussions. I know that they are then aware of what can happen. And I know that they are aware of not just the Jamaica Cybercrimes Act, but of other countries and the participation that exists worldwide among countries in terms of sharing information about cybercrime. And that now, I must say, coming off of this and after what some of what Mr. Miller said, I would be scared if I wasn't before, based on hearing all of those things that he described. But you have to remember, going back to that original question and discussion about privacy and the role that social media plays, where I said they basically collect the data and then that data and that profile can be shared. You are the one that's providing it. And so to take that question of Alexa as well, let's say we use Alexa. Alexa is something that's provided by Amazon, right? When you sign up to use Alexa, you provide some bits of information. But Alexa can be used for quite a number of things. One is playing music, yes, and to play music, you can either do it from Amazon Prime or you can do it using Spotify, for example, or from somewhere else. Signing up from Spotify provides some other bits of information. It can also be used to control other devices within your house. And so you could have Alexa turn on some lights. You can have Alexa start that same vacuum that Mr. Miller was talking about. Alexa can tell you what to reorder from your fridge if it's tied all to your local network. But part of all of that, to be able to do that, is to collect the data that you would have provided on your refrigerator, on the type of lighting that you have, on the laptop, on the game station that you also have. And so Amazon not only has all of this data, they can then start targeting you with specific ads just on a basic level. But that information can also now be used elsewhere because it also now has the information from Spotify. It also has the information from your provider. It can then potentially access those things. This has nothing to do with malware and so on, right? That's a different kettle of fish. But you have to be aware, and to some extent, it has become a lot more difficult to separate yourself. The only way that I'm sorry, the only way that you can prevent any of this happening is if you become completely isolated, which means you are no longer on any network. You drop out of every social media network that you're on. You don't sign on to the internet. You don't use a laptop. That's not practical in modern society. And so any hacker, anyone who has the time and the resources will find a way to get into your home if somehow there's something there that they want, or some business. Chances are what's in your house is not of is very valuable to you, but some of the things, unless it's for some sort of entertainment, I don't want people to get too concerned or too worried about these kinds of things. It is still information that you provide. It is data that will be collected. It's just a part of being on a social network. You have to be cognizant of what information you're providing. You have to be cognizant of the fact that that information may be made available to others, and what therefore could be a consequence of someone else having that information. And so think about what you're doing. Don't randomly post images of yourself or of information, again, as I had said earlier, that you think you may not want others to see, because in providing it to one service provider that you're registering for, it may become available to others because of how highly integrated many of these companies are?
It's a very complex question, Mr. Cohen, because when you talk about not giving information that you would not want to be shared, uh, within that equation are questions of information being taken that you did not intentionally want to
Yes.
share. In the case, for example, of these assisted pieces of technology who respond to
Yes,
voice
and
commands and so on, who are making points. So in that particular regard, how do you safeguard against it? We can use technology against technology. That's a fact. So, for example, when you look at things such as voice authentication, Alexa and Siri, if it is that it's not inbuilt with that kind of technology, there are actual ways for you to ensure that voice authentication is there so that they can't use anybody else's voice but yours. Another
yes,
thing that can be done is that you look at location verification. So if you have a hacker who is 5 miles away who would utilize frequency to gain access to your Alexa, then the location verification would ensure that the only way that they would respond to a command is if, for example, that Alexa is within 2 meter or 6 feet of you, a particular distance. So they will act on that. And finally, but there are others that I look at is frequency filtering. So it actually filters out the frequency that hackers would use to gain access to your Alexa, so as to ensure that the authenticity and the integrity of your software is not compromised, but it only acts on your command when it is that you want it at points and for functions that you desire it to be used for.
yes, I agree with some points that you made. In particular, as I had said earlier, there are bits of information that you provide that you're not aware of, like your IP addresses and your device addresses and so on. But there are, as I said as well, if someone is determined enough, they can still access your data. They can still access your network. Yes, you can say you can use biometrics, and some biometrics are more reliable than others, but they all also have false positive and false negative areas that overlap, that are part of, again, that profile that is created. And so it's not an exact science in that respect. And so it still comes back to to use your example of location. Part of registering for Spotify is to know where you are located. And once you are provided that, that now also becomes part of the data that exists for you, part of that profile. And again, it's something that if you wanted to sign up with Spotify, you have to provide that location, right?
Yeah.
Similarly for Amazon, similarly for others. It's just something you have to be appreciative of, cognizant of that in taking advantage of these services that you want. That's part of modern society. You have to be aware of what it is you're providing. Provide just enough that allows you to realize and get these services that you desire, but not too much that you know that once that is available, that means it's not just that service provider. It can be any number of service providers, and you won't be aware of them. Just be mindful of those types of things.
All
And
right.
and why again? You also made some good points about protecting yourself, but the average user isn't aware of the majority of what was there, right? And by doing all of those things, it also then makes the utilization of that service very complicated. If I am told that I have to um, install an application to monitor Wi-Fi around me and to monitor some other things, even if I put it on, 90% of
Don't
people
use
aren't
it.
going to
Don't
use
use the
it.
service then.
What they will do is that they will cuss and they will say
Yeah.
something is drawing down on my smartphone and is making my smartphone slow, right? They will then delete whatever security application is on it because they can't stand how slowly this thing is running and they want to be able to use the
Forget
thing
it.
faster, and they just toss it.
Yeah.
You guys can hear me, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So
Yes, we're hearing you.
I had a question from the audience,
I think
and
we've lost Darren though.
yeah, I think so.
Have you? I'm here. I'm hearing you. I'm seeing you.
No, no, I think we lost Gavin.
Oh, Gavin. Okay.
Yeah, he mentioned he had some connection problems, but we'll just continue without him for now. Hopefully, he can rejoin and be a part of the last topic. So as I was saying, we had a question from one of the audience members, and this one was quite controversial. They were asking about needs. So I think what they want to know really is how are, how will our data be protected and how can it be used against us, the information that NITS will collect. And I must admit, who, I'm not very educated on the whole NITS. I know that it's an idea that would be that they're trying to establish, but I'm not too sure on the details. So if any of you know the details, you can just kind of explain it briefly and then kind of just talk about how that data will be protected and how it may be used against people. And if you can offer some security to people, I would love that as well.
Okay.
Well,
Darren, if
the
you don't
national.
mind,
Okay, sure. Go
I'll
ahead. Go
take the
ahead.
first part. Maybe you can take the
Absolutely.
second part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Doctor,
it's a public key infrastructure that they're using. And that public key infrastructure means that uh, there'll be three parties involved basically. You, the user, there'll be what we call a certification or an independent certification authority. And then there are other people who would like to use or to communicate with you. That public key infrastructure basically means that you will own two keys, and that's a long string of digits. You will have one that only you will know, and that you will be the only person to have it, right? The only other entity that will have that or knowledge of it, not the key itself, is that third certification authority, that independent authority. The other key that you would have is what's called a public key, and that you make available to anyone who you want to communicate with. Now, anything that occurs that you want to keep confidential or private will be encrypted with those keys. And so you can also use it as a what we call a digital signature. And the it that I'm referring to is the private key that you have, the one that only you have, that can be used to verify that you are who you say you are. And that's where the independent authority comes in. Someone else who wants to share some or communicate with you privately can use that public key that you made available because you will be the only one to decrypt it with your private key. And similarly, when they receive something from you, they will only be able to decrypt it with the public key that they've been assigned. And so that bit of information doesn't get shared, and the bit of information is the private key doesn't get shared with anyone else, right? And so the data and so is also therefore encrypted, meaning it is unintelligible. If someone were to intercept it, they won't be able to make any sense of it because of the fact that it is encrypted. Now, the other question I'll leave to maybe Gavin, because I see that he's back on. And that question, Gavin, was how is that data to be used against you? Now, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but that's a really broad and kind of question to ask. I
I'm
don't know what you
sure.
mean by using against you, Gavin?
In the context of NIDS.
Yeah, yeah, because,
Yes.
because you have some people where they're a bit skeptical about the whole needs thing, and they're like, I'm not sure if I want to give the government that much information and so on. So, um, yeah, so if we're to give, or when we give the government, certain information, will it be able to be used against us, and how can we ensure that or how can they ensure that it's not used against us?
I've seen a whole bunch of things about the NIDS, the NIDS thing, and people having a problem with the data they're sharing. And I think a lot of times when the discussion is happening, people are skipping around the the root cause of why people are so uncomfortable. Now, the data that NIDS is really requesting, that's something that the government should freely have. Things like anything that can identify you as a citizen. That's something that the government should freely have, because you're a citizen of the country. There isn't any reason why you should be a citizen and you don't want the government to know that you exist. So, so that's one. Now, from my perspective, my professional perspective, I believe the reason people are so hesitant and skeptical about it is that they don't trust what the data will be used for. So, and it's something that happens also with social media companies, right? Where, they are saying, yes, this is what your data will be used for, but for a company that has a trend or a history of misusing data, then, people are skeptical, such as some of the big tech companies. And it's the same thing that's happening now with NIDS and the government, where because there is a history of misuse in other areas, it's also filtering over into now the data side of things, where people don't have trust in other areas. So now, how do you expect them to have trust with data? And it's a similar type of thing. So from us, from our side as citizens, or just people out there as citizens, it's healthy and it's good to ask the questions, such as, how will the data be used? Will this be documented? Is this something that you are somewhat legally committing to, that if you tell us that it is A, we can hold you accountable that you will do A? And because a lot of that isn't really available. For example, I am a cybersecurity professional, right? And I don't know exactly what are the security, or at least have a good idea of the security controls that will be in place, right? And that's not something that appears to be available. Not necessarily the specifics, but just having the general idea. Okay, what are you going to do to protect the data? That information isn't really available. So it's going to be a difficult sell when there appears to be gray areas in the whole transparency of what's happening. And so it will make it harder for people to buy in. And it doesn't really matter what we necessarily want, as in terms of protecting our data as citizens. It's more of what will actually happen. And I think that is the big cloud now. No one knows how the data will actually be protected outside of what we believe should be done.
Yeah, and I think as time goes on, we'll learn
Yeah.
more about the actual needs bill. Yeah, I think you're saying something.
Right. Sorry, I was muted just now. What I'll say about NIDS is that first of all, I believe in any system that is able to track its citizens for security purposes, for welfare purposes, among other things that a government has a responsibility for. We've seen it in other parts of the world. In fact, the most developed countries do have some form of national identification, a system that is able to identify its citizens, to protect them, fundamentally to protect them. Okay? So to that extent, I believe in NIDS, at least at a conceptual level. Now, as it regards how it is that it is going to be managed, what are the kinds of data sets that will be collected and how will it be used, who will have access to it, that information needs to be clear. And I must commend the government for having made some strides in making that information public. They have engaged in various public education fora to give information to various sectors of our economy. So youth groups, they would have had various youth development fora that sought to have persons ask the critical questions and to respond to them and so on, among other things. But I think fundamentally what needs to be looked at is how it is that if we are going to be getting ourselves to national development status, how are we going to be utilizing this particular bill, this particular it would be a device in the long run, because there'll actually be a national identification card. How will you use that in conjunction with things such as the Data Protection Act and other UN statute that safeguards persons' data in regards to who can use it? It's very instructive that the government had tabled and passed the Data Protection Act and the cybersecurity strategy being in place from 2015. It's very important and instrumental that these things be activated once it is that you have such a particular a card in the national domain, because that is what will ensure that the data that persons make public is actually being protected. So cybersecurity is critically important, but I believe that for us to grow, for us to have a greater level of security, and for us to be able to conduct commerce, even within my industry, that sort of information will be important.
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I think a lot of the confusion is coming from a state of ignorance. A lot of people don't really understand this type of technology and this method of identification because it's new. It's new to us, and you know I, I think it's our jobs as people who have the knowledge to kind of educate people on what can be done, the possibilities, and how to protect themselves and all these things. Um, so if anyone watching has any questions for any of the panelists, just shoot them right now. Hopefully we can get some questions. So if you have any questions for any of us, just shoot some questions right now. I'm not seeing any questions coming in. All right, if that's the case, then it has been a lovely discussion. I would like to thank you all for coming here, taking the time and having this great discussion. Dr. Curtis Bobsy Earl, Mr. Darren Miller, Mr. Gavin Dennis, thank you so much. Um, I think we've all learned a lot this evening about our privacy and um, and how it can be used. So thank you guys again so much. Um, if you have any closing remarks, any of you would like to make about anything, um, feel free right now before we close. I'll just give people in the audience just maybe 5 more minutes. So we'll just use 5 more minutes to um, give any closing remarks and give the audience 5 more minutes to think about any questions that they would like. In the 5 minutes that I'm using, just give two quick tips on how to protect yourself online. So we'll start with Dr. Curtis Bobsy Earl. Quickly.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. And it was a pleasure to meet you, Romario, and you, Darren, and you, Gavin. I Two tips. I think I provided one earlier. And that was be cognizant of what you're putting out there um, on the internet and in cyberspace. And the other one is since NIDS came up, and I thought it would be a likely question. I agree it's something that we need to seriously think about and see how we can integrate it and accept it as Jamaicans. And because, as it was said, there are a number of governments and countries that have done this and have been doing it for a number of years. The underlying encryption is something that's been tried and tested also for a number of years. And so it would, I think, enhance the types of services that we receive from our government and the ease with which we can conduct business in Jamaica. So I think we should have a little bit more of an open mind towards NIDS and what it can provide.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Curtis Bobsy Earl. Mr. Miller, final thoughts and two quick tips on how to protect yourself online.
Yeah, well, my final thoughts are that we are in a space where the question is, or the idea is surrounding it's surrounding privatization, which is privatization of your data assets versus monetization. There are persons within this space whose interests are driven by the profit motive, and they will do what they need to do to ensure that your data are made public to the right persons so that they can earn. That is how they earn, especially the social spaces. So in order for you to protect yourself, look at things that we sometimes overlook every single day. Utilize proxies, utilize VPNs, ensure that you change your passwords regularly, institute ad blockers. Know that there are alternatives to many of the traditional things that we've been using. For example, Google. Google stores your information. What about using Quant? It's QUANT. I learned that recently, that they actually do not save your data once it is that you use that search engine. So, explore the digital space, but be aware that in many instances, your data are being used to sell you information about which you are not being paid. So you have to be a little bit more perceptive.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Miller. And Gavin, we'll end with your final thoughts and two quick tips on how to protect yourself online.
All right. So the first tip I'll give is to use an antivirus software on your computer or some other type of security suite which automates a lot of the things that you need. Such as blocking malware, blocking harmful websites or websites which are flagged as phishing. Use some type of security software, especially if you're not a technical person, and that will save you a lot of work. Second tip is try to use a different password on each website. Oftentimes, when one website is hacked and the data is dumped, they simply take that password, that username and password or email address, whatever it is that's exposed, and they go to multiple websites and reuse that to get access. So, those are my two: antivirus software, use a different password on each website.
Okay, thank you so much, Gavin. And that is it for this week on privacy in the digital age. Once again, I thank you all so much for coming on and taking the time out of your day to come and have this discussion. I hope everyone watching has learned something because I know I have. Um, yeah, thank you guys so much again, and everyone have a lovely rest of the day. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, and
You too.
congratulations on
Thank
this.
you.
Very
Thank you.
important.
Thank you, thank you.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.